The 1950 FIFA World Cup, held in Brazil from June 24 to July 16, was the fourth FIFA World Cup. It was the first World Cup since 1938, the planned 1942 and 1946 competitions having been cancelled owing to World War II. It was won by Uruguay, who had won the inaugural competition in 1930, clinching the cup by beating the hosts Brazil 2-1 in the deciding match of the four-team final group. It was also the first tournament where the trophy was referred to as the Jules Rimet Cup, to mark the 25th anniversary of Jules Rimet's presidency of FIFA. Host selection. Because of World War II, the World Cup had not been staged since 1938. The planned World Cups of 1942 and 1946 were both cancelled. After the war, FIFA were keen to resurrect the competition as soon as possible, and they began making plans for a World Cup tournament to take place. In the aftermath of the war, much of Europe lay in ruins. As a result, FIFA had some difficulties finding a country interested in hosting the event, since many governments believed that their scarce resources ought to be devoted to more urgent priorities than a sporting celebration. The World Cup was at risk of not being held for sheer lack of interest from the international community, until Brazil presented a bid at the 1946 FIFA Congress, offering to host the event on condition that the tournament take place in 1950. Brazil and Germany had been the leading bidders to host the cancelled 1942 World Cup. Since both the 1934 and 1938 tournaments had been held in Europe, football historians generally agree that the 1942 event would most likely have been awarded to a South American host country. Brazil's new bid was very similar to the mooted 1942 bid and was quickly accepted. Qualification. Having secured a host nation, FIFA would still dedicate some time to persuading countries to send their national teams to compete. Italy was of particular interest as the long-standing defending champions, having won the two previous tournaments in 1934 and 1938. However, Italy's national team was weakened severely as most of his starting lineup perished in the Superga air disaster 1 year before the start of the tournament. The Italians were eventually persuaded to attend, but traveled by boat rather than by plane. Because Brazil and Italy qualified automatically, there were 14 remaining places available. Of these, 7 were allocated to Europe, 6 to the Americas, and 1 to Asia. Banned teams. Both Germany and Japan had not been permitted to compete for qualification. The French-occupied Salland had been accepted by FIFA 2 weeks before the World Cup, several months before the German Football Association was reinstated, while Soviet-occupied East Germany had not yet founded a football association. Italy, Austria, and other countries involved in the World War as allies of Germany, were not subject to international sanctions. Italy qualified automatically as defending champions of 1938. British nations. The British nations were invited to take part, having rejoined FIFA 4 years earlier, after 17 years of self-imposed exile. It was decided to use the 1949 Euro 50 British Home Championship as a qualifying group, with the top 2 teams qualifying. England finished first and Scotland second. Teams refusing to participate. A number of teams refused to participate in the qualifying tournament, including most nations behind the Iron Curtain, such as the Soviet Union, 1938 finalists Hungary and 1934 finalists Czechoslovakia. Withdrawals during qualification. Argentina, Ecuador and Peru in South America withdrew after the qualifying draw. This meant that Chile, Bolivia, Paraguay and Uruguay qualified from South America by default. In Asia, the Philippines, Indonesia and Burma all withdrew, leaving India to qualify by default. In Europe, Austria withdrew, claiming its team was too inexperienced. Belgium also withdrew from the qualification tournament. These withdrawals meant that Switzerland and Turkey qualified without having to play their final round of matches. Withdrawals after qualification. Before the qualification competition, George Graham, chairman of the Scottish Football Association, had said that Scotland would only travel to Brazil as winners of the home championship after Scotland ended up in second place behind England. The Scottish captain George Young, encouraged by England captain Billy Wright, pleaded with the SFA to change its mind and accept the place in Brazil. However, Graham refused to change his position and so Scotland withdrew from the tournament. Turkey also withdrew, citing financial problems and the cost of travelling to South America. FIFA invited Portugal and France, who had both been eliminated in qualifying, to fill the gaps left by Scotland and Turkey. Portugal refused, but France initially accepted, and was entered into the draw. Draw and subsequent withdrawals. The draw, held in Rio on May 22, 1950, allocated the 15 remaining teams into 4 groups. Group 1, Brazil, Mexico, Switzerland and Yugoslavia. Group 2, England, Chile, Spain and the United States. Group 3, Italy, India, Paraguay and Sweden. Group 4, Uruguay, Bolivia and France. After the draw, the Indian Football Association AIFF decided against going to the World Cup, citing travel costs, lack of practice time, team selection issues and valuing the Olympics over the FIFA World Cup. Although FIFA had imposed a rule banning barefoot play following the 1948 Olympics where India had played barefoot, the Indian captain at the time, Sail Manna, claimed that this was not part of the AIFF's decision. France also withdrew, citing the amount of travel that would be required in Group 4. There was not enough time to invite further replacement teams or to reorganize the groups, so the tournament featured only 13 teams, with just 2 nations in Group 4. Of the 13 teams that competed, only one, England, was making its debut. Several of the Latin American teams were competing for the first time since the inaugural 1930 Tournamento Euro. This included undefeated Uruguay, as well as Mexico, Chile, Paraguay and Bolivia. Yugoslavia was also making its first appearance since 1930. This would be the United States' last appearance at the World Cup finals until 1990, and Bolivia's last until 1994. Format. The Brazilian organizers of the tournament proposed a new format in which the 16 teams were divided into 4 first-round groups of 4 teams, with the 4 group winners advancing to a final group stage, playing in round-robin format to determine the winner. The main reason for this choice was money. The organizers had spent a great deal on stadium and infrastructure investment. A straight knockout tournament, as had been used in 1934 and 1938, would feature only 16 games, while the proposed 2-group format would guarantee 30 games, and thus more ticket revenue. In addition, this format would guarantee each team at least 3 games, and thus provide more incentive for European teams to make the journey to South America and compete. FIFA originally resisted this proposal, but backed down after Brazil threatened to back out of hosting the tournament if this format was not used. In each group teams were awarded 2 points for a win and 1 point for a draw. Had there been a tie on points for first place in a group, then a playoff would have been held to determine the group winner. The entire tournament was arranged in such a way that the 4 first-round groups had no geographical basis. Hence, several teams were obliged to cover large distances to complete their program, although Brazil was allowed to play 2 of its 3 group matches in Rio de Janeiro while its other group game was held in the relatively nearby city of São Paulo. Summary. A combined Great Britain team had recently beaten the rest of Europe 6-1 in an exhibition match and England went into the competition as one of the favourites. However, it was not to be, as they went crashing out on June 29 in a shock 1-0 defeat by the United States which, combined with their 1-0 defeat by Spain, led to England being eliminated. Italy, the defending champions, lost their unbeaten record at the World Cup finals when the team was defeated 3-2 by Sweden in its opening match. Because of this defeat, Italy failed to progress to the second round. The final group stage involved the teams who won their groups, Brazil, Spain, Sweden, and 1930 FIFA World Cup champions Uruguay, who were making their first World Cup appearance since winning the inaugural tournament. The World Cup winner would be the team that managed to finish on top of this group. The final Group 6 matches were shared between Rio de Janeiro and São Paulo. Brazil played all its final group matches at the Estádio do Maracanã in Rio while the games that didn't involve the host nation were played in São Paulo. Brazil won their first two matches with a 7-1 thrashing of Sweden and 6-1 rout of Spain. Before the decisive match, Brazil was sitting on top of the final group and had one game left to play against Uruguay, in second and only a point behind. On July 16, before a huge home crowd of 199,954 in the Estadio do Maracanã, the host nation only had to draw against Uruguay and the trophy would be theirs. After such crashing victories over Spain and Sweden, it looked certain they would take the title, especially as the home nation went ahead in the second minute of the second half, thanks to a goal from Fryer Section A. However, Uruguay equalized and then with just over 11 minutes left to play, went ahead 2-1 when Alcides Giggia squeaked a goal past Musa Barbosa, and Uruguay was crowned World Cup champions for a second time. This stunning defeat surprised Brazil and is referred to as the Maracanazo. The average attendance of nearly 61,000 per game, aided greatly by 8 matches held in the newly built Maracanã, set a record that would not be broken until 1994. Not counting the Maracanã matches, the average attendance was a still impressive 37,500. However, the only venues that saw crowds comparable to or greater than those in recent World Cups were the Maracanã and São Paulo. Other venues saw considerably smaller crowds. Venues: 6 cities hosted the tournament. Squads: for a list of all squads that appeared in the final tournament, see 1950 FIFA World Cup squads. Seeding: match officials, results, group stage, Group 1. Group 2. Group 3. Group 4. Final round. Goal scorers: 8 goals, Ademir, 2 goals, 1 goal, own goals, Jose. Copyright Para, FIFA Retrospective Ranking. In 1986, FIFA published a report that ranked all teams in each World Cup up to and including 1986, based on progress in the competition, overall results and quality of the opposition. The rankings for the 1950 tournament were as follows. Footnotes. Bibliography: Lissi, Clement Angelo. A History of the World Cup, 1930 Euro 2006. Lanham, Maryland, Scarecrow Press. ISBN A978-0-8108-5905-0. Retrieved August 27, 2010. External links. Media related to FIFA World Cup 1950 at Wikimedia Commons, 1950 FIFA World Cup on FIFA.com, details at RSSSF. Note that they often disagree with FIFA on goal scorers and times. History of the World Cup 1950.